Politihoot! And now, from a lonely little corner of the Bronx.
Hello, Politihoot fans. Today, our guest is Beowulf Rocklin. And Beowulf and I met because I was a guest on his previous podcast, Facepalm America. His new podcast is called Good News for Lefties and America. So welcome, Beowulf.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jackie. It's a pleasure to reconnect under more auspicious and optimistic, I don't want to say circumstances, because the general circumstances, if anything, are just a wee bit more negative if we survey the political situation. Yeah. But the structure of my new show is definitely focused on the positive and the upbeat, and I think we need a lot of that.
We sure do. So tell us a little bit about the podcast and how it can help us lefties.
So I had come up with this idea. It was actually several months before the election itself. I thought to myself, I have for decades at this point, whether it is on NPR or public radio or the podcasts that I listen to, like things are becoming more and more digital. So I started like where Saturday mornings I would literally like turn on my radio, say 20 years ago, and listen to all these wonderful radio programs. It was fantastic, and my wife and I would listen, and now this is migrated into the digital world. So I have these series of very intelligent, very well-constructed, generally very progressive shows that I listen to, talking about how there's this thing that's bad and that's just falling apart, and here's the history of why it's happening, and it's yada yada, and this person is controlling this, and that person is controlling this, and then there would be someone at the end who said, yeah, we got to stop this thing, and it's not very good. And they'd go and quote a member of Congress or something like that who is a Democrat, and they would say, oh my gosh, yeah, we got to do something about it, and I'm introducing this bill and blah, 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 but nothing really happens ultimately, or we never hear anything about that bill again. And I thought to myself, I like listening to those, and it's important to know what's not going wrong so that you can correct them. But if you keep hearing the same drumbeat, even during the Obama administration or the Biden administration, if what you hear is this thing is wrong and this thing is wrong, then your mindset is going to be, oh my gosh, it's horrible and there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. And I think that's a place where we tend to get stuck in. So I thought to myself, I know that there are things that are good that are going on. They might not be making the headlines, but they are out there and they're happening every day. And so I thought, let me start just like a series of news stories every single day and put it out there. And I finally got around to putting it together. I think it was like the day before the election. And then the election happened. And oh boy, there was like just cascading need for good news, because I will tell you, like those of us on the left were just like stunned by this and realizing, oh my God, what is about to happen? And there was just like a need, and I continued to put these stories out, and I got from the beginning people saying, oh my, I really need this right now. I don't know how I'm going to get through it. And I listen to this every single day because I need something good, because everything else is just Trump's doing this awful thing, or this horrible thing is happening to this government department, or we've signed a treaty with Satan, or whatever it happens to be. And yet, and this is something that I have developed over the course of a career in radio and podcasting, as a producer especially, I go through various like websites and I find all sorts of different news. So I know that there's this site over here. It's not a huge news site, but it has like good news. And there's this news site over here, and it'll say things like from a progressive perspective. And I know these little bits and pieces. And it turns out, if you know where to look, every single day, there are good things going on, whether it's like a Democratic state legislature that's passing a minimum wage increase, or a city that has declared itself a sanctuary city for LGBTQ folks, things are happening. And the legal system is fighting back against what Trump is doing. So it's not even just on a local level. It's on a national level, and it's very positive. And I truly believe, and I call it Good News for Lefties, but the full title is Good News for Lefties and America, because what's good for lefties is good for America. It's just that they haven't realized it yet.
I'm in that camp too. However, let's look at the national level first. Trump is dismantling the government. People have put years and years of experience and knowledge into building these institutions, and he's tearing them down with an executive order. Tell me something good about that.
The good thing is that people are realizing that is insane and that they are fighting back against it. I cannot tell you the number of, I heard one figure, there are probably more than this, so I guess I can tell you. I think there was something like 50 lawsuits that at least these top corporate law firms were engaged in currently in an attempt to try and stop the Trump administration from doing this dismantling in one way, shape, or form, whether you're talking about the different departments or even filing suit against like the idea of Doge and its legal ability to exist seriously in question. I don't think they've met the legal requirements for what an organization like that is even supposed to be, as I've understood it the last time. So people are fighting back against it. Democrats are doing certain things to fight. I wish they would be more vociferous. I wish they would be louder. I wish they would gum at things more in the Senate. But I will say, for example, that Brian Schatz, after the dismantling of USAID began, the senator from Hawaii, put a blanket hold on further State Department nominees from the Trump administration. People are not taking this lying down. So I would say that is the good thing about it. And perhaps also that this makes us realize that these are things that we have to be engaged in. This is raising the level of engagement and awareness. And it's not just something that we can like email in or fight on social media. This is something that we have to be directly, personally involved in, because he's destroying things that make our personal lives and our lives the way we know it.
It's crazy. I was telling you before the interview that I am affected directly as a college professor because so many of our grants and anything that we got, any money, revenue sources we got from the federal government, he's holding the money hostage. We're not going to get it anymore until we can prove that we're cutting our DEI programs. Basically, we're doing things his way. Now, the good news is that I work for a state institution, state of Connecticut, and Connecticut is pushing back against the federal laws. So that's going to be a big to do when that happens.
Okay, it's interesting because I know that my state of Oregon has, to a degree, I forget exactly what's being covered, but they are preparing for cuts in things like Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, et cetera, to help fill in the gap on a state level on that sort of thing. So they've been preparing ever since the election for the possibility that these sorts of things might happen. So that's a positive thing as well. And again, I've reported on some of these on the podcast, but if you also look at the individual state legislatures, even some of the red states, know that Montana the other day, I believe, rejected some sort of anti-transgender measure. Not to say that they've done a lot of great things, because I think they've done some negative things in that way too. But Washington State advanced a bill increasing the minimum wage. California has like a $50 million legal fund to fight against Trump doing exactly this sort of thing. The blue states and even some of the red states are definitely fighting back. That's positive. That may not be enough, but it certainly doesn't. Gosh, I wouldn't want to be in a red state right now, but it certainly does mean that there is hope, that there is resistance, and if this ends up impacting enough people quickly enough, which it certainly seems to be, I think there's going to be resistance beyond just blue states. I think that we're already seeing that Trump supporters are saying, this is not what I voted for. I didn't want like a massive destruction of the infrastructure that I'm dependent on. That makes no sense whatsoever. And it's our job, I think, it's my job as someone on the left to say, to bite my tongue a little bit, because I'd love to say, I told you, but the productive thing to do right now is to say, hey, I hear you. Let's organize and make this.
I think you made two really good points. One is that the states and organizations, local people are now taking steps to prepare for the ramifications of losing the support. One of the saddest stories, if I might share this with you, is that in the state of Alabama, the lower income people who used to get supplemental money with their heating bills found that they had $100 extra on their heating bill this month because that extra money was gone. And they don't have an extra $100. Yeah. Yeah.
That's and you don't think about things like that. You just take it for granted, and that is part of the game that I think that the far right has been playing. Like the things that government provides that are positive just fall into the background, and they're a given, and they know that people will take them as just that's part of what I get. That's part of what I expected, and yet they highlight the things that are either annoying or occasionally inconvenient about government, whether it be taxes or sure, sometimes there have been excesses in DEI, but I think we can agree that overall it's a positive thing to try and correct for centuries of racism against people and discrimination against people. But you create a situation where people forget that, oh yeah, everything that you've built your life on basically comes as a result of the concerted effort that the people of the United States have made through the government. The rich people don't care for that because the regulations that government has in place don't allow them to create even more massive piles of money in their own bank accounts than they already have. So they want to get rid of it. They're going to be okay anyway, because like they have the resources to deal with all this stuff that the government is able to provide a backstop for 99% of people in the United States. So they don't care if everything falls apart because they will have their own little bubbles. And I think people are finally beginning to wake up.
A personal story down the street is ex-cop. He'll always back the blue. And we're friends. His kids would come over as they were growing up. And I had to walk past his house during the election process. And he had all the Trump signs up. And I live in the Bronx. And I just left the supermarket. And I see on the front page of the Daily News that 9/11 heroes have been losing their funding. And that's sacred and holy around here, especially with the blue and the firemen and practically everyone.
It's amazing. Like I know, I don't know where they are politically, but I have a couple of friends in an organization that I'm a part of. It's actually the Elks Club, who do some just incredible work at the VA. They volunteer at the VA, like part of what they do. And I've been involved in a sort of tertiary way with some of their projects is doing volunteer work around some of the folks who are at our local VA dom. And to imagine like the kind of like cutbacks that are coming to that organization, which I think I think I saw a chart somewhere that like more people are employed in that than like most like any other single government department. But I don't know if that's exactly that right. But a lot of people are employed there. To have that cut back, to have like our veterans and have that be cut back, like that doesn't resonate with conservatives. That doesn't resonate with people. I live in a county that voted for Donald Trump, like I think pretty much all 3 times. With a little blue sub bubble around the university that's in one town here, but people support the troops, and now Trump is undercutting the people who support the troops, literally funding the troops.
He never hid it though. If you remember John McCain, who was a prisoner for 5 years in Vietnam, and Trump said something about he was at a memorial service or he wouldn't go all the way into the memorial service. And he said, I like people who didn't get captured.
Yeah. And he's called like veterans suckers. And he got out of serving himself, which I understand if you make a principled stand against the Vietnam War because you think it's a bad thing. I get that. I get being a pacifist and not wanting to be involved in war at all. But he did it because he was just a coward. He didn't want to get hurt. He didn't want to get impacted. And like at the same time, he's very happy to send missiles or invade wherever he wants to, or make the threat of it. But yeah, personally, he has no connection to it. I think, unfortunately, he doesn't have much empathy at all for human beings. I think he's been in a bubble for too long because of his wealth. And also, I really see, I don't want to completely necessarily get into analyzing him. He has got some serious father issues that have created some enormous alienation in him. This is an argument like for good fatherhood and figuring out how we treat and bring up like young men in this society, because in his case it was not done very well at all, and I think we're all experiencing the repercussions.
Yeah, I agree with you. And his niece agrees with you also.
Yeah, and she's a professional.
Yes.
I'm not a professional.
Yes.
She is, actually.
Yes. So, what do you think if we could go back to the good news? Because we haven't been sharing that. It's an easy trap to fall into. But I live in New York, as I had mentioned, and I was in a cab, or no, it was cab. I was in an Uber in Las Vegas. And the driver turns around. I said, I'm going to fly to JFK. And he goes, "What's with your mayor?" So I was just listening to your podcast, and you said a few positive things about Eric Adams. I voted for him. No, the situations surrounding. No, I voted for him. He was a cop. Crime was increasing.
What I don't know if I mentioned it like before we started like recording or not, but Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii, the fact that he put the blanket hold on State Department nominees every step of the way, especially the U.S. Senate, is a possibility to slow things down. Every single thing should be filibustered. Every single nominee should be opposed at every point at this point. Like there's not. This is not an administration that should be tried to be got along with. That point is past. If you are on the political left, if you are a sane individual who wants there to be civilization and society and basic services in the United States of America, then you need to oppose this with every tool at your disposal. And it really needs to happen, and that can happen at a state level with regard to, no, we're not gonna assist with ICE raids. Federal processes can be slowed down on a state level. They can be slowed down on a federal level. People can drag their feet on any number of things, and I think it's going to come to the point where civil disobedience has to be involved, at least until we can, like through elections, begin to rectify this. But that's going to be a longer process than I think we can afford to wait on, because Trump is going to have at least 2 years here where he's going to be like unfettered, and he may be like disregarding court rulings, and that is very disturbing. That is a crisis level thing. They're gonna have to be some people, like I think in this country, and maybe members of Congress among them, engaging in civil disobedience and slowing things down and just preventing these actions from happening, because they are blatantly unconstitutional, blatantly illegal. And even when they are ruled as such, Donald Trump seems at this point to be ignoring them, the rulings against him. So other means have to be taken.
Right.
I think we're going to.
You had mentioned the court process, but that takes a year and a day to get anything going.
Even if it gets to this, it's interesting because I actually think, I am hopeful that the Supreme Court, as much as it is stacked in Trump's favor on many of these things that are going to be brought before them, will actually rule against Trump. I think that there is a very clear-cut case on the birthright citizenship that is so clearly outlined in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Right. There's so much legal precedent dating back to the 19th century behind that. I can't imagine that the Supreme Court will rule in favor of Trump on that. I honestly think that it's just like something that he is raising as a distraction to take oxygen out of the room for some of the lesser things that he really wants to get done, and some of the other destructive things that he wants to.
Yeah, he's been sucking that oxygen out of every room.
Yeah, and I've seen several places where Steve Bannon has said that's what you do. You have three things a day, and you hit them with those, and the media will bite on one of them, and you get the other two things done.
Right.
And they're following through on that strategy, but they may be doing more than three things a day at this point. It's hard to keep track
Right.
of all the executive
Right.
orders that he's signed.
Right.
So I think
Right.
I mean, we've got to keep our eyes on the key things. I think it is a hopeful thing that the court system, even the parts of the court system which are imbalanced in Trump's favor, will see that some of this is just nonsense and rejected out of hand. Whether Trump will follow those judgments is another question. But I ultimately have hope in the American people, and that they will, in one way, shape, or form, prevent this from going completely over the edge. So at heart, I am an optimist because I have to be. Otherwise, it's a worse situation that I want to really even think about. So I'm thinking about different things because there are very positive things going on. People realize that this is nonsense. States realize that this is nonsense. And even beyond the political sphere, like people are in deep red South Carolina. One of the good news stories that I was reading about the other day, the biggest factory creating solar panels is being created in that state. Deep Red, Texas is one of the largest creators of solar energy, producing energy that can reduce the level of greenhouse gases and fossil fuels that are being burned and slowly begin to turn our climate away from the disaster that it's going towards at the moment. So there are positive things going on that means humanity will continue in a stable and civilized form in the future, despite of what Trump is doing.
What if things get really bad? You had just mentioned civil disobedience. I had seen an article about it's time to withhold our taxes.
Yeah, I've thought about that. I've thought about that. Yeah, it could be that time. I don't know. It's we will see what happens and how long Trump chooses to ignore some of these court rulings. But honestly, if they have, by having Elon Musk and his team of 19-year-olds go into the Treasury payment system and have complete control over the payment system that processes trillions of dollars every single year, it may be time for us to consider stuff like that. I could see that happening because they have illegally taken control over a system, and if their rulings are being ignored by the courts, can it be said that individuals or us collectively as a nation refusing to pay into a system that is not representing us, that is illegal, that is in violation of the law, is that an immoral thing? I don't think so. At that point, I do not think so. And there are things like a general strike that perhaps should be considered. We're a more diffuse country than a place like France or Egypt, where there's one central capital in which demonstrations can be made in quite the same way. But things like that are possible. It's not necessarily a matter of guerrilla fighting in the streets like the movie Civil War that you see. What if everybody just decided to stop working? And what would Elon Musk's net worth be worth at that point?
Yeah.
What happens then? Maybe we could just shut it all down. Maybe if Trump thinks he can shut the government all down, maybe we could shut off first.
Ooh. Shut off the government. The people united will never be divided.
There is a wonderful British TV series that I used to like to watch. I still watch it from time to time. That was made about 20 years ago. It was called The IT Crowd. And the one piece of abiding tech advice that I got from that program was the question, have you tried turning it off and on again? And maybe if we just rebooted the government, that would clear up the virus or clear the cache, so to speak, of Donald Trump. Maybe we have to take a basic tech approach and just...
I think what you brought to light here today is that people have been comfortable. They've been getting their benefits. They've been going about their lives using these benefits that are important to them. But Trump's been cutting these, Trump and Elon Musk. And maybe it's time that my my blue neighbor, my ex-policeman, will start to realize what he did when he voted for Trump, or those people in Alabama who are not getting their heating support in. It's hitting the normal person.
That's right.
Yeah.
I know that
Yeah.
like Alabama Senators Katie Britt talked the other day about how she didn't like the cuts to the federal government that were like funding universities in her
Ooh.
state because there's a
Ooh.
tremendous amount of research that goes on in her state which positively impacts the economy. And I think you're right. And I think that I know some of the reasons for it because I've worked in the media for a long time. And I get that so much of what we do these days is based on dividing ourselves into these different silos and left and right. And we think of ourselves that way. Maybe to an extent, I'm perpetrating that with good news for lefties, but it is good news for lefties in America. That is an important part of it. But we'll say, do not like disregard or cast off those people, because if you look at the numbers, 70% of Americans want universal health care. Republicans, everyday Republicans, support Social Security and the VA and Medicare and Medicaid. And that's socialism. And those are things that we come together through the government to support. And those are things that improve all of our lives. And whether we call ourselves Democrats or Republicans or a member of a third party, we all want those things overwhelmingly. And we need those things to protect our society and keep ourselves stable. So just because someone has a Trump sign in front of their house, you can be mad at them. Sure, I get that. But don't cast them out. Don't make them anathema. Call them in and say, we both want this. We both want a good life. We want our children to succeed. We want to have a solid retirement. We want our roads to work. We want our tap water to be drinkable. We all want these things. Let's make these things happen. And this force, whatever you call it, you want to call it Republican, you want to call it Trump, this force is making those things go away. Work with me. Join with me to help stop that. And let's figure this out together, because unless we if we're all separate, if we're all staying in our little silos, whether you're a liberal, even look out the left, they're liberals, they're moderates, they're progressive, they're leftists, they're socialists, they're communists. Right. Okay, let's stop fighting with each other. And let's stop fighting with the right, like they're Republicans, they're MAGA people, they're centrists, even in the Republican Party. But we all need these things, and we need each other in order to make sure that this aggressive attack on our society and our civilization stops. We can join together and we can make something better. Let's get rid of these labels and let's move forward and make sure that we get through this time. We can do it, but we've got to do it.
Yay! You just made a case that, the sky falling now with the Trump administration might be a good thing.
It could join us together. It could bind us together in a way that few other forces have. Maybe Trump ultimately will be a net positive once we get together and purge him from the body politic. That could well be a thing, because that's going to go across the aisle. It's getting to the point. If a senator from Alabama could say this is no good, if a Republican senator from Maine can say this FBI nominee is a nut job, if that can happen, then we can all come together and say enough is enough. We want a society that has these basic good things. Trump, we're not going to do it. Let's go forward together with.
Yeah, I think that's the only way.
I see a lot of bad things, but ultimately, if we don't focus on what we want, on what we're hopeful about, and what we're trying to achieve, then all of this criticism is completely unproductive. Criticism is helpful if it helps us get somewhere new and positive. If we're not aiming towards that, then we don't have hope. If we keep our eyes on the prize, then we have a prize to move towards.
Beautiful. So you've made me feel better. I was depressed all morning.
We just got to keep circling back.
Oh.
We got to keep circling.
What I'll do is I'll turn on your podcast, Good News for Lefties in America.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Beowulf. It's been great talking to you as always.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yes, bye.
So that's all for us today here at Politihoot. Please leave a like or subscribe to the show or leave a comment below. You can also go to our Facebook page at Politihoot and check into Podline FM. You then can record your own voice and leave your own message that we might play on the show. Love to hear what you think.
Politihoot!